Hey everyone, good afternoon.
Hello.
Hey, I believe that we are live now.
Yeah.
Cool. So, hey everyone, welcome to How Should Startups Think About Remote Work and Distributed Teams, or as I like to call it, I got my shot, now what do I do? I'm Mimi Zheng, a member of the Partnerships and Sales team here at Turing. Today, I'm joined by Lewin, CTO at AIKON, which enables developers and consumers to adopt blockchain. We also have Greg Moulton here. He's SVP of Pocket Buildings, which enables users to store, view, and share their building plans in media. And we have Palash Soni, who is co-founder of Goldcast, the platform that we are using today. Great pleasure. And Chris Bunting, former engineering manager at Abstract, a platform for file-based design collaboration. Let's get right into our conversation. I want to begin by asking each of you, what are your plans for post-pandemic? But before you answer, let me invite members of the audience to type in their questions for our panel, and we will try to get to them as many as possible. So, okay, let's start with Chris. What are your plans post-pandemic?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Hope you're all well. Plans post-pandemic, a consensual hug with my friends. I want a little physical contact back in my life, some high fives. No, I'm mostly joking. Post-pandemic, very excited to get back to the workforce. Very excited to see folks that I haven't interacted with in a long time, but truly like see some human beings again, engage with folks on a regular basis that I know and love dearly, whether that's within the workforce or without. So it's a very broad question. I'm excited for a lot of things post-pandemic.
Yeah, this could be, tailored towards, the workspace or just like something from your personal life. What about you, Greg? What are you excited about?
Yeah, hey, hello everyone. Nice to meet you all virtually. I'd probably echo what Chris said. It's obviously been very difficult scaling a business we actually launched during the pandemic. We came out of stealth mode, so we've had a couple extra challenges on top. But my co-founding partner and I actually hadn't been in the same room since before we founded the company. So for us, I'm on East Coast, he's on West Coast. I was just out there 3 weeks ago, so it was nice for us to be in the same room and not over a Zoom call for hours and hours. So we're very much looking forward to getting the team together, the global team, getting them together. Just started recently traveling to customer appointments as well. So on a very limited basis, we have the ability to get in front of customers. Again, we've done hundreds of Zoom demos. It's nice to sit across the table from someone and talk and tell the story and get the real reaction. So I think on top of that as well, just sort of the return to what will undoubtedly kind of be the new normal. So that's what we're focused on, and of course scaling the rest of the year.
Yeah, and what are some of the biggest challenges, would you say, that have happened the past year with the pandemic from a business perspective? And I'll pass this question along to Trey.
Sure. Yeah. So for us, we went all virtual. So we're a San Francisco-based company, but we went all virtual. And during the pandemic, we started scaling. So we got to product market fit, and our customers started, buying our things, and we needed to hire more people. And so, we'd normally been constrained to our geographic, and so in San Francisco and hiring folks in the Bay Area. And so what we started doing different is opening up, since we went completely virtual, is opening up the option to hire people who are natively remote. And since then, we've hired more people who are now remote than are in our geo. So we now have a team that is largely distributed. So yeah, so that's been a challenge, and but also a blessing, because we've been able to hire some really good engineers. We've actually been able to hire twice as many engineers for our same budget, because we were looking outside the US, and particularly in the Bay Area, which is great engineers here, but they're also extremely expensive, and they're very mobile, so they can be poached very quickly. So anyway, and then to answer that other question, what we're going to do, we're going to meet some of our folks for the first time in person. So we've hired a lot of folks in Asia or Middle East and Europe, and we're gonna plan a get together physically as a team for the first time. So we're going to meet a lot of folks for the first time. So I guess the challenge will be continuing to hire people and manage them remotely in general, right?
Yeah, I think the pandemic had a lot of us thinking about the things that we've taken for granted, even the simple things, meeting in person. We weren't able to do that for a long time. And to your point, Trey, I'm curious, like, how you're managing your current remote teams. Is it that you have stand-ups during certain hours or overlapping hours? How does the day-to-day look like?
Sure. So we definitely need some overlap. I think that to me is a requirement, but not a lot. Right? And depending on the individual, right? So we have a minimum requirement of 4 hours overlap when a person starts, and then we can work together to kind of find an overlap that is comfortable. Our goal is to find a sustainable timeline so that people we hire are comfortable doing what they want to do. We don't want them to sort of snap to our time zone just because we want them there. We want this to be sustainable, right? So we're hiring folks remotely, but we want them to be with us for a long time. So I would say at a minimum, we have a daily stand-up. It's a 10-minute stand-up. And although we're all sitting down, I've noticed that recently. Nobody has been standing up and stand-up for over a year. So I think we're going to start standing up and stand-up. But it's a very short meeting. And then we schedule some meetings, very few, over the course of the 2-week sprint. We do 2-week sprints. So we schedule all our meetings within a 2.5 window time box. And so at a minimum, we expect everybody to be on those meetings. But other than that, we allow folks to be flexible. And it really depends on sort of their seniority, right? So when they first start, we want more hours of overlap so they can have more time to ask questions interactively. And then as they scale up in their productivity and get onboarded, then we have a minimum, essentially now at a minimum of 2.5 hours, just so we can accommodate those meeting schedules. But that's about it.
Yeah, I would say we're pretty similar. We run 1-week sprints. We tend to not do daily stand-ups. We used to in the early days, and very quickly what it became is everybody migrating over to Slack and sharing personal stuff and work stuff, and it kind of became that outreach. And then we run 2 days a week. We do a pretty lengthy product call with the engineering team and the designers to kind of go through what we did last week, what we're working on now. So I would say we kind of got away from the 10-minute little stand-up beginning in the day, focus more on actually getting things done in longer meetings throughout the week. But as Trey mentioned as well, the key is finding a couple hours every day that overlap, but we're not so concerned about someone being 8 hours in Eastern or Pacific time zone. A couple hours and letting them have the flexibility to enjoy their life as well has been key, kind of letting people do and work how it works for them.
That makes a ton of sense. And, generally having several hours of overlap seems good. I'm curious how Goldcast does it, Palash, if you have any insight on, how you guys are currently managing your remote teams and anything new that you have coming this year, post-pandemic.
Yeah, Mimi. So we had obviously, we started in pandemic, and then we grew to an engineering team of almost 20, 25 people now across different time zones. And so we had a share of battles initially with, okay, like when do we have that stand up, because we have people all across time zones, and it's not really fun to have a stand up on Zoom. In an actual office, it's fine to have like these hour-long stand-ups, but on Zoom, it's really painful. So we stopped doing that. What we do is that we make sure that when the sprint is rolled out, the product is spec'd to a level that it doesn't require a lot of catch-up. So we have started believing a lot in the documentation and clarity so that everyone knows what they are getting into. And the couple of other tactical things that we have started doing is using those Slack bots like Stand-Uply or those which ask people to update every day so that everyone can see in a channel who is doing what, and that has helped a lot, at least helped us to keep an eye on if someone is blocked or not. The other thing is we have very quickly started moving to a concept of squads. So people in small squads will look after different part of the product, and they'll have ownership for that part of the product. So if they are blocked, then it's their responsibility to kind of suggest, okay, let's have a meeting. So it's more of an ownership-based system than something that goes on a cadence. And that has helped us navigate like different time zones in a meaningful way.
Makes a ton of sense. And I also like what Trey said about meeting folks in person, maybe get-togethers. Greg, Chris, and Palash, are you guys planning to do something similar with your teams, or Like, what are some of the ways that you guys plan to engage your employees, whether that is events, virtual, or in person, or meetups?
Yeah. So one of the things that we started doing is like a monthly all hands. We didn't have it, and I realized very soon that it's very easy for people not here in the line of fire to lose context of what's happening. So that monthly all hands is very important, and we got such overwhelming feedback from the teammates that we are going to do it religiously. And then post pandemic, the first priority would be for everyone to meet everyone, at least put a name to the face to the name. But more importantly, from a purely business perspective, we realize that people not in this time zone, they lose context of customers, and so it's very important for them to meet with customers. We are planning to have like a not a full office, but at least a transient office in somewhere in New York, and then have people come over there in batches, at least spend some time in the same time zone, meet customers if that's allowed, or at least have that constant communication.
Yeah, that's awesome. And in some ways, I think having some of that face-to-face is crucial, because there's more contextual cues, which might be lost in, like, online.
100%.
Yeah. And Greg, just curious what you guys are planning to do.
Yeah, so we're still relatively small. So we have 12 total people on the team and a couple part-timers. But our plan is we are going to, hopefully a little bit later on this summer, do our first in-person, and then every 6 months following that. And what we'd like to do is move it remotely. So start in the location where people started with a company. So we will actually bring the company to them. So we'll start San Francisco, then East Coast, Rhode Island, then Poland, and kind of move people around. I feel like we spent so much time on Zoom, seeing people's homes and their cats and their family walking in backgrounds. It'll be nice to put a little context with that and get to meet it. And I think that's kind of been one of the other challenges, right? When you're not getting in the office, is the ability to really get to know somebody. We've got people thousands of miles away in countries that I've never been to. And I can say that honestly, taking the time and really putting forth that effort, I think has kind of strengthened the relationship. So what's that in your background? What are you doing? Oh, you have a cat, you have a dog, you have to run out. Your mom's there, your grandparents are in town. What are you doing? So really for us, it's kind of still focusing on the personal aspect of business, and then bringing the team to different areas so that we can experience the different cultures as well.
That makes a ton of sense. I like the idea of having like an office dog, office cat, or office parrot, or bring your pet to work day. I'm just curious. So out of all the things that were most surprising to you guys during the pandemic, like, what surprised you the most about working through this 2020 to 2021 period? And I'll pass the question along to Chris.
Yeah, great question. So what surprised me about working during the pandemic was during the start of the pandemic, Abstract was a remote first company, meaning that folks were able to work remotely, and they were treated as part of the organization's onboarding, that we were going to have folks that were remote. I feel very fortunate in so much as that it was a relatively smooth transition, moving from partial on-site to full remote. I think the key there was the intentionality around programs and education, ensuring people had the right tools that they needed to complete their jobs, and that there was active communication and education around what that transition was going to look like, regular check-ins, and otherwise just communicating very openly about what was going on. Taking an iterative approach I found to be very helpful in that moment in which no one really knew what was going on. It was like, okay, let's just keep the dialogue open about the best ways for us to work together. So those are some of the things that were somewhat surprising about the transition to a fully remote world for me.
What about you, Trey? Like, what did you find surprising?
To me, the most surprising thing was that the sort of the structure of a daily commute and like meetings in the office, like how that went away very quickly. And it doesn't, like, to me, it seems like that was the way I did everything forever at work, and suddenly it wasn't necessary at all, and I don't miss it. And that I feel like I'm more productive because I don't have to do those things, right? I can just focus on work. So to me, the most surprising thing was the pattern of work that I've been doing as my entire professional career turns out to not be all that relevant to getting work done. So we still have to figure out how to like build a team dynamics and culture and all of that remotely. But a lot of the mechanics of the office and being in the same, room together and building together didn't seem to be that relevant to getting the work done. The other thing that's most surprising is like how the time can just blur. And now it's either I'm always at work or I'm always at home, but I'm always both, right? So where's the blurring between those things? And so without having that structure, that's been a part of a challenge. When do I stop working? Mostly for me, I just find it's like, oh, it's 8:30 already at night. I'm still working. So that's, I guess that's the other thing. It's just the blurring of the lines between personal and business, I suppose.
100%. So I've been working remotely for 6 years, and I would say that is probably one of the more challenging things. How do you separate like the work and the personal life? And so I'm actually curious, Palash, if you have any insight in that area, because I mean, we probably all like really love to work, but how do we create these boundaries for ourselves and, make sure we also have time for self-care, because everyone needs some kind of self-care. Maybe not Elon Musk, but, the average person does.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things that we have tried to inculcate, and at least I try to inculcate, is not have everyone on the clock with Slack messages or emails. Not set the expectation that you have to come back right away. Everyone should understand that we are in a remote setup. Time zones are different. People need their space. So we are, and I know it's tough to do, but we are trying to inculcate more of like an ownership kind of culture where we trust each other to do the right thing and not always be like on your mobile or on your laptop just responding as soon as possible and people getting pissed about not getting response fast. So that's one thing. The other thing which I have found useful is just taking like midday breaks, because I've realized that we can get a lot done if there's no commute, there's no like coffee breaks in between or random stuff that you used to do in office. You can get a lot done by afternoon, and then you can really take a break. And I do at least encourage that a lot. Take a break in the afternoon, just go out with your kid or a dog or whoever, and then come back and get recharged.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I found that even just taking some walks, even if that's for 30 minutes, kind of refreshes, resets. Maybe I'll think about like something with work or something outside of work, and then I'll be ready to tackle things. So we do have a question from the audience. It kind of goes back to our events and meetups and customer meetings. So folks are kind of curious, like we have Phil here. How do you plan to handle travel rules? Vaccinated versus unvaccinated for international employees and the possible need to quarantine. Let me see if there's additional here. Mask rules. I mean, that is a pretty legitimate question, because some folks may need to travel on site for client meetings. So how would you guys handle that? And I can pass this over to Craig. He's laughing and smiling here.
Yeah, this is the hard one to answer, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to say too much. I would say that we would always err on the side of caution. I'll say and state this: believe in the vaccine, vaccinated. I would want all our employees to get it before they travel. We would never mandate travel for them if they didn't feel that they were safe. And I think we just do our best to be flexible and work with people. I can say I'm constantly stunned at how many hours folks have worked for us late in the evening, on weekends, done so much more, like Trey said, without the commute, and Palash and Chris said the same thing. So if we need to be flexible on international travel and understanding what the restrictions are going to be, and maybe it makes sense to push things a couple months, we're certainly going to do that. But I think on the other side, we want to balance that with, we really do want to get the team together in the same place, in the same room, and work on it. So I think, like all things in the pandemic, that we will just roll with it and kind of figure it out how it goes. But we'd obviously never want to put a person in an uncomfortable position. And we'll just see, right? The other thing is every country has different rules about quarantining, coming here, us going there. So again, it's just one of those things that we're going to have to figure out.
Yeah, it is a very difficult and tricky type of situation. But I will ask Chris for perhaps an alternative perspective on this, or if you want to add on.
I'm just going to give a big +1 to what Greg said. I think he touched a lot of the points. If this was Google Docs, I'd put the highlighter over. I'd hit Command B, Command I under flexibility to highlight that. I think that's going to be a key moving forward, flexibility.
That was catchy, Chris. We do have another question from Mujenka. So we had an enterprise panel earlier, and they spoke about some things around inclusiveness and coaching and mentoring. So in these areas of being inclusive, diverse, and coaching and mentoring, what's the biggest challenge for leaders in the startup space? And I'll pass it on to Trey. You're nodding, so.
Well, it's really important, right? So if you're hiring folks like we do at different levels, right? We hire entry level people, mid-career people, and then senior people, and obviously they need different levels of mentoring. So part of not being in the same room with people is that you don't get to pick up sort of on the way people are struggling, or so I think that's one thing that it's been obvious to me is like you need to be more proactive in terms of asking people more regularly, like, how are you feeling about that? Like, are you getting what you need out of, this communication you're having with your coworker or whatever? So I think the thing that I've noticed is that I need to be more proactive and on a regular basis, ask people if they're getting what they need and how they're feeling about coming along. Because if you're sitting in a room with a bunch of new hires, then you can kind of sense if they're looking at the screen and or asking a lot of questions or that kind of thing. So that's definitely one thing that is, you have to be intentional about that. I've noticed that more so than before. Before it was sort of intuitive. You would pick it up by being there for somebody. And then obviously, like, different folks at different levels need different levels. And so I have put together a little bit of a plan where new hires get a certain amount of hours every month with me and then their senior lead, so that we can ask questions proactively and then have that conversation. So more proactive engagement, I guess, particularly the younger folks. And we want to ramp people up as fast as possible. So the other thing is, like, we give them hard projects and then encourage them to ask questions. So that's one way of getting the mentorship sort of driven from their side. They have to ask questions if they're on a hard project.
That makes a ton of sense. And
yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Palash.
No, sorry, just one point on that is oftentimes in startups you would hire, initially you would hire people who can get work done, on the ground. And so the intersection of that and people who have been managers or who have really managed is generally low, right? And so I think one mistake that I have made and a lot of first-time founders have is hiring actual, like, people who can mentor and lead fast enough. It always doesn't, when you first hire them, you would always feel like it's, you did it 6 months late, and that's same with everyone. So general recommendation, like, hire those people faster than you would want to, and it's, you can never go wrong by hiring people like that, even though it looks like, okay, they're not going to grind as much or things like that. But I think that's a general bias that is there with the startup world, and hiring those people faster would always pay off.
The challenge of hiring and competition. Yeah. And do you guys think the world will ever go back to the way things were before the COVID crisis, or have we been permanently changed by it? What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, great question. The $1 million question, I feel like. I don't see us not taking the lessons that we've learned in this moment and applying them to the future and making changes based on those things. So I imagine that we're going to continue to evolve the way that we work. We got a year's worth of data on what a hybrid model can look like, or what a fully remote model, I should say, can look like. Curious to see how that's applied in the future. I bet there could be a moment in which we go back to the way things were, probably sometime off in the distance, at the least, never at the most, sort of the minimax there. So I'm probably just as curious as everyone else is to take the lessons that we've learned around communication, flexibility, and intentionality and apply them to the new models moving forward.
Yeah, I think at this point, things may not, well, they're returning to some sort of new normal, but the things pre-2020, it might take a few years to reach to that point, based on, how it's unfolding. And Greg, if you have any insights you want to share.
I just think it's probably like most things in life, right? The pendulum was one way, it came way back the other to full remote, and now it's going to probably land, I think, somewhere in the middle. And talking to other co-founders about going fully virtual, right? Ditching the office, now coming back and saying, hey, you're focused on commercial real estate. What are you seeing? What are owners saying? What are tenants saying? And undoubtedly, they're all saying we want to get back, and our employees are asking us to get back to the office in a slightly different way. So I do believe that it comes back. I think it probably comes back this summer, not in the way that it was before. I certainly think that there will be changes, but just talking to other co-founders that are doing it like probably most of us with Slack and online and Zoom meetings and monthly happy hours and things like that, now they're really missing that in-person collaboration and, the move towards, co-working in a slightly different way, right? Having maybe smaller offices around the world and other locations. I do think that we have to get back to that at some point. So again, kind of what Chris said, right? The min-max, and I see things in life kind of end up most times back in the middle. So I think that's where we go.
Yeah, life comes full circle. So we have about 4 minutes left in our session. And I think as one last takeaway, if each one of you could go around and give just one piece of advice for managing teams post-pandemic, what would it be? And I'll start with Palash.
Yeah, I think I'll just repeat a little bit of what I said. It's one of my lessons, having managed a big in-person team in my last job and then now a remote team, is that your hiring has to be very more thought through. So I think if you look for one thing during hiring, it's how someone takes ownership, even if you compromise a little bit on experience or say skills. Someone who takes ownership is the right person for remote, because you cannot really monitor anyone or you have to trust them. And so whatever way you can verify that, we should verify that, and then you cannot go wrong with that person.
Makes sense. And we might be coming up only 2 minutes and a half. So Trey, I will allot you 30 seconds.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, I think what Palash said was really, really important. But I also think culture tends to suffer when you're remote. So I would say you should be intentional about culture, and culture is really what you do versus what you say you're going to do with it, right? So I would say carve out time to think about what your culture is like, and then try to empathize with your folks who are remote and see if they're feeling like they're a part of the situation, and then try to do things proactively to engage and sense your culture. I think that's super important now that we're remote.
And Greg?
Flexibility. I said it earlier, I'll say it again, flexibility in location, hours, time zones, work, overlap. Pretty much everything for us kind of boils down to flexibility.
Makes sense. Chris, I'm curious what your insight would be.
Have grace for yourself and others. We have to love ourselves and those around us in order to be effective and productive human beings. So keeping that at the forefront, I think, would shape a lot of the things that Trey and Palash and Greg have mentioned.
Yeah, these are all really, really good points around hiring, around flexibility, having grace. And yeah, having grace also kind of goes back to like having kindness and being understanding and empathetic, especially during this time. So that's all that we have left for this session. And I want to thank all of you guys for such a great discussion, and the audience for their questions. I know we had a fun format where we kind of went through some of the questions beforehand, but the second half was questions from the audience. So thank you, audience, for contributing. And we are on to our next session.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.